We.
Yeah.
All right, we'll resume the annual session. Back with. Somebody's like Brad. But it's, second. Everybody's.
Well, hopefully that meeting was beneficial and. But
If not, we.
sometimes speaking is better than trying to. What's done today?
Good, at least it's warmer.
Yeah. Well, it's supposed to be in the mid-80s.
Okay.
I got an air graduation.
Yeah, it's supposed to rain today.
Till 11:15, and then I'll be back down.
Yeah,
Give her.
although I planted a bunch of trees and bushes. Bunch of stuff.
Water. Oh, yeah, but I water.
Yeah, I did.
I figured you get time to look back.
I find it rains while we're working. The weekends are beautiful.
We're gonna do that much good, okay, go, that'll be the fall.
Gotcha.
And you yank a bush out with your, you have to dig around it first or just yank it out.
I just,
Put the tow strap on it, put the tow strap on the truck and,
that's how big it is.
yeah.
Likely you'll get it partially out and you'll have to do some cutting.
The old,
That four-wheel low, at least my truck will, it'll pull some stuff.
I had some old juniper bushes at the first house I bought in London 20 years ago. Pulled out with my scout. But yeah, 4 low in the front yard, they're on Arlington Avenue. I'm sure it was a site,
Yeah,
but even then I had to get it partially out because the roots were a lot big around it.
Yeah.
it's been there for
40
years, but it's a, what's it?
yeah.
If it blooms 3 times, it's gonna snow.
Forsythia.
Forsythia. It's ugly, it's not shaped well.
You can burn it back. You can check it.
How to do the grant?
It's fun pulling stuff out of your truck too.
That's what I wanna do, really.
I was a kid, I saw my grandpa pull some fishing out. We started with lawnmower, that didn't work.
Yeah,
He didn't have a truck, so we pulled his Buick electric in the front yard, and we hooked the chain to the Buick and pulled.
I heard that one, that was pretty spicy.
Well,
My wife driving, it's like,
a Buick with a big block.
Lots of metal.
All right, this is the time we've had set aside for the discussion of the development plan approval process. Mr. Penny, Planning Commission's glad to be here.
I just want to, I don't know if we have the slideshow available.
just send the PowerPoint or PDF, either one of us.
Yeah,
Last week was a blur. At least then Dennis is under building and zoning files.
I know, I looked at it.
nah, I sent it to the team.
all
Okay,
three.
I'll find it.
Yeah.
I think I maybe remember said, oh yeah, no problem. What are you looking for, Rob? I can't get out of this meeting to go into chat.
Yeah, you can just click over on the teams. I am looking for it, but. Did you send it to?
Do it as three.
That's three here.
Yep. Oh. Yeah, so that's, May, so yeah, I can forward it to,
Send it an email, please.
yeah.
I got it.
You can put it up there.
Okay. So I'd like to discuss with you guys about the development plan, the approval process. Way that it is currently now, and maybe somehow to make it look quicker, so they won't have to wait so long for approval. And as we go through, you will see why there's problems sometimes when we have development, because some of the paperwork and stuff's not done in time. So as you go to the second one. Okay, so Pan convenience store is a good example. I'm just showing a way how when you do rezoning process, you go from A1 to C2. So currently it's not C2 property, so we have a rezoning. So it goes to your typical subdivision review board, your regional plan, your county rural zoning commission, and the county commission. So the way the process should be going. And that's what we've been doing. So that's right. So it takes about 3 to 6 months because of the 30-day process of have to go out and send it to the public, be notified and everything else. So that's why it takes that long. So for example, this convenience store is about 8,000 square foot, 6,000 restaurant, 10,000 warehouse, and 20,000 convenience store. So the next slide.
Can I add just something real quick? So just for everybody's benefit, subdivision review board, the first one, they make recommendation, no teeth, right? So then it goes on to regional planning commission, who again make a recommendation.
No, they do approval.
They do approval,
Yes,
okay.
all the rest of them do approvals.
Yes, okay.
But when you really look at it, so on the next slide, you'll see the difference. Okay, so as you can see, the subdivision review board, they do everything from drain, water, sanitation, and utilities, all subdivision regulations. So they do the technical issue with the plan, like Rob stated before, they don't do approval, but they do recommendation. But these are where all your engineers are. These, you know, I'm not recommending them to do approval, but they're the ones that need to review these plans. I mean, really review these plans. See, and next one you see board of zoning appeals, if they need a variance, they do variance and conditional use. And then, you know, if they have to go through the rezoning first, then they have to come back to the board of zoning appeals for any kind of variance, and you can't do it at the same time. Because the reason why somebody denies it later on is a viewpoint. It doesn't mean anything. So what a lot of these boards don't, as the year went by, I realized the boards really don't know their duties, their responsibilities.
Yeah.
Regional planning commissioner, you know, they do all the land use and zoning, which is typical, but they don't know that they're supposed to do transportation, schools, drainage, water, sanitation, utilities, and all that. They don't. And same thing with rules, anything type of development, landscape and development improvement. And then for you guys, it would be any special additional condition use, any overlay districts, stuff like that. Now, when people come in and want to do like improvements, common areas, common space, that's what you guys should be looking at and suggest, help subdivision review board make better recommendations. So for a good example, somebody come in for overlay district and they bring down the cloud and say, okay, now we're going to do a multi-use family, mixed use product. And then you guys are going to say, well, okay, that's good. We like it here, but we would like to see a certain type of trees on the berms in the front of 40. We would like to see, you know, certain development happen here. We will not allow this. So you guys help the rest of the board make a better decision when it comes to development. So you guys are very important and help guide the rest of the boards and what they need to do. So as we go through.
And when you, commissioners historically have appointed a board member, more or less, the reliance was on the other board members to bring them along and educate them in the process and what their roles and responsibilities were. Unfortunately, as time went on, those people didn't know what they were supposed to be doing, which led to all kinds of questions and concerns that were outside the purview of the board. So we tasked Dennis was basically putting together a cheat sheet and manuals, so they're all well informed on what their roles and responsibilities are.
And I will sit down and talk to each board and tell them,
Train more or less.
yeah, train them what they should be looking for, what they should be doing. A lot of times I realize that I have to always bring them in because they get off the whole subject and talk about something else that may or may not be doing. I'm like, but this is the property we're looking at.
Right.
This is what you guys should be recommending or approving on, not what you hear from the public. But this is what you guys actually need to be doing.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it's 6 chickens or 12 chickens.
So, hold on a second, there's some background noise, could you mute whoever's extension?
Is that you up there?
There's
There's a Jennifer.
it needs to be muted. The muted,
There,
it's like this. And then not muted.
There you go. Very good, sorry. No problem. So the way that it should go, especially for rezoning, subdivision review board should get a concept in order to help them get an idea of what they might develop. Concept plan is very generic. So when they start to go through the regional planning commission, they should have some kind of preliminary. Could be 5%, 10%, 25%. Something, because the preliminary gives you the meats and potatoes of the project. It will tell you if they're building a road, what's the K value? Well, if they're doing a pond, how much volume that a pond will hold? But that goes to the subdivision review board because they do all the drainage, water, and sanitary. But commissioner, their duties also to do the same thing, but the people who really knows it is the subdivision review board because they review the plans. So when they come in, when the person come in, they submit their 10 set of plans. Every department or every commissioner will get one. So you guys will get one, county, rural zoning, the regional, they will all get a plan so you guys can all look at it. So when it comes to you, you have a preliminary plan, maybe 10%, 15, whatever. You have a better idea of what they might be doing. The reason why you want to do that, because when it comes to, let's say it's off of a state route, ODOT needs to make a comment. At this point, ODOT might say, well, we only allow you to have an entrance and exit only. That's going to change the whole dynamics of the whole department, of the whole development. So you don't really need a full preliminary, but they need an idea because now you have everybody else reviewing. So ODOT will get a copy or our engineers will get a copy of it. So, stuff like that will happen where like we have one now that they might have to change their whole design because the way that they may not get an entrance or exit from ODOT, they might have to change everything. Or ODOT like, well, we need you to widen roads. Okay, well, that's going to take some space. So now they might have to rearrange their whole design. So the next screen is a commercial development examples. So this is what we call preliminary plats. As you can see, they start to give us an idea of how the design might look. It's not the final one, but it gives us a great idea so that we can make better decisions on how the development is going to happen. So the next slide will be the current process. So a commercial and a residential, totally different animals. Commercial will do preliminaries. A final plat for a residential will do preliminary and a final plat. And the reason why, because the final plat, we gotta make sure everything's done correct. And that's where I will give them addresses and stuff like that, especially if it's a multi-use. It's gonna take me a while to do address. So while we are working on the preliminary, I can start working on the address at the same time, but it will be put on the final plat. So when you see a plat, you see the development, You'll see where all the addresses go. You see how it's running. You see how the roads are running. So currently, this is the way the project should be going for preliminary and final plat. So instead of going through rezoning, that's 6 months, sorry. And then another 6 months for any kind of development, because that's the way it should be going. We don't have planners to review every detail. So we rely on the department heads and whoever in charge, because after a while, we have to sign it again. So when we go to preliminary, we sign off. Same thing in final plat, we sign off on the plat itself, showing that we agree that it goes by our rules and regulations. So instead of being 6 months to a year, we're making that shorter where we'll have to come back to subdivision review board, which is easier because they meet every other week. Instead of waiting another 30 days for a region, another 30 days for rural, another 30 days for commissioners.
But right now, you're basically, you're repeating the process. So you're doubling the time where a final plan approval can be done. So you're basically asking for let's go 4 months for this process, and then as it currently stands, you'd go through it again, so you're talking about 8 months. Whereas what Dennis is proposing and talked to us about is taking it through that process the first time, and then when it comes to the final plat review, taking it to subdivision review board where all the technical minds are at to sign off on it, and everybody, whether it be Brian's office, Dennis's office, others would stamp that, everybody would have a stamp on that final approval final plat, instead of taking it back through the process again as it currently stands, which could again take a minimum 8 months. Because you're just asking you to go back through the process again. Basically, it's basically have to go through the process once for the rezoning, then the process for the second time for the actual plan. Based on what we have there, which is not uncommon. Right. But I see that all the time, that it has to go really through dual process. Yeah, rezoning first, then development process second with plans, more detailed plans.
Correct. Yeah, with the plan process, you typically would have it go through the rezoning with a preliminary plan, and then it would submit the final plan to commissioners for approval. So it's a little faster that way. This is for, correct me if I'm wrong, just the normal rezoning. So, yeah.
And when it's time for us to stamp off, we will invite all the, chairperson of each board or commissioners come to the meeting. If you guys like it to, you can sign off on it. If not, then they will have to address all the issues before we can sign off. And this will help us in the long run. So if you go into the next one.
Quick question is, do you have representation from Mid-Ohio subdivision review board?
No.
Is it necessary?
We will, yeah, once they take care. So here's a good example of preliminary and final plat. So as you can see, the preliminary, like I said, give you more detail, the trees, the landscape, where things can be located, if there's any roads, how many parking spaces. So it goes to what's required parking space, what's proposed. Now, as you go into the final plat, you start seeing the lots, you start seeing the dimension, you start seeing the setbacks on here, and then you will start seeing addresses placed upon this road that has been dedicated. So the final plat is very important because it gives us enough time to actually pretty much catch anything that we might have missed the first time. And this will allow us to shorten the process. And because a lot of companies, time is money, money is time, basically. And we don't want to lose a lot of people because, we have a longer process than most people. But, like I said, 4 to 6 months, it's fine. But once you start getting close to a year, some companies are going to say, well, we're not going to do it. This takes too long. So that would help us in the long run. So as we go through the slides here.
You see a lot of variation in preparedness of applicants. That's part of it too. So, like,
you know, a company like Sheets has their act together, been through a lot, you know, a lot of resources. That was a pretty, streamlined process versus, you know, some of the other, C-store type of things where it seems like it's, you know, kind of a guy that wants to build something, may not be prepared to invest in engineering, may not be prepared to comply with regulations. There's a lot of back and forth on those instances that drag it out because of that, not because of our process, so.
Yeah, and then a lot of times because they don't have their floodplain application, they don't have the land service application, you know, they don't have those approved yet, but they're pushing to go forward, but they're not prepared, like I said. So,
And we can't get what we need out of their engineers because they haven't authorized their engineers to do the work because they don't want to spend money.
yeah. So, yeah, it will vary. It will vary, depending on the company and everything else, but this will help like the sheets and stuff like that. So, you know, once they go through the process, they have like a good idea of how to go through it. And we already discussed the whole process there, so we can go to the next one. So as we stated that, you know, all your professionals, you know, the Madison County engineer or the engineers, the water and sewer, the planning and zoning, the building, the health, environment, or ODOT, you know, we're the ones who's gonna really make sure that whatever you guys want on those plans will be there. And so we are the ones who'll be gathering the paperwork. Like I said, right now, we have a C-store where we need floodplain application and they didn't fill out right. And so that's taking them too long. It's only one little sheet. I don't know why it's taking so long to do it, but, you know, there's other process. They didn't get the land disturbance, but permit approval and, you know, they might have get environmental approval. They didn't get that. So they're dragging their feet. So that's why, you know, it's very important that we get all our paperwork in and that, you know, we do all our calculations, get stuff right. So, as like I said before, subdivision review board, you know, the last to review it, review will be done, and what we can have, if you guys want, you guys can do it electronically, or you come in, if you can, come into the meetings and sign off on it. So either or, as long as you guys love or like the development, we can do that. If not, we say, well, oh, no, you guys need to go back to the drawing board and correct it the way we want it to be done, or you didn't do this regulation. And so, you know, the owner of the company or the civil engineer will bring in the 10 copies to the engineering office or to me on Thursday through the subdivision review board. And, you know, we will distribute out, you know, to you guys, to the other boards like that. So you guys will review it before, you know, we can go through the rest of the process. So when you guys finally see it, you're like, oh yeah, we already saw this. Yeah, what about page 2? It's missing. I would like X amount of trees here. I like this bird. So it gives you guys very prepared when plans come through. Okay, so everything I have highlighted in red is basically the stuff that the people at subdivision review board look at anyways. So, you know, yeah, you guys can make suggestions, but the subdivision review board with the engineer's office and everybody else will make sure that, you know, the water, the drainage, the utilities, the floodplain, all that stuff, because we have to have paperwork for it. So, but these are the things that I know each board doesn't know what their responsibilities are, and that's where we have problems. And whenever I do meet with the other boards, there's 2 in particular, I'm constantly like reel them in and remind them, hey, this is what you guys are responsible for. Other stuff you guys are not supposed to be doing or asking about, but this is what you're supposed to be responsible for. And we have other boards and other people that can do that.
The rules and regulations are not opinions. It's one of the largest struggles.
Right. And, you know, when it comes to the rural, the regional, and you guys, we count on your guys' recommendations and what you guys would like to see out there. So when you guys look at these plans, say, I like Jupiter out there instead of this plan. We like a berm between this because it's beside a single family home or something like that. So then as it goes through the subdivision review board, you know, they can suggest it, but then the other boards can make sure it's done. So that's the importance of it. So, when it comes to like transportation with the engineer and ODOT, I mean, if they don't like the set of plans, it's gonna make, it might majorly change the whole development. So you guys will probably see another set of plans come through because they have to satisfy what they need in order to get approval. The same thing with floodplains, you know, I have to make sure that everything's on the correctly before then. So go ahead and go to the next one.
We've been fully hooked in on those subdivision review board meetings for our commercial projects, just to coordinate the access, the traffic issues. And that's been helpful.
Yeah, so having everybody involved in those meetings really helps. So, like I said, everything in yellow is basically what the subdivision review board really gonna be looking at the most. Well, they look at all the stuff, but that's the stuff they also look at. So nothing against the other boards, but the people who really review the plans comes through the engineering department, you know, the water and sewage. Health department, they will really look at those. Those are the ones that know the ordinance.
They're the experts.
They're the experts. So, I mean, we have to, you know, let them do the job. You know, if we're gonna have great products out there, you know, we're gonna let them do their job. You know, and, you know, like I said, you guys have an idea of how the plans go. At the end, you see subdivision review board preliminary. So that's where it will go through the whole process of rezoning, but subdivision review board will go take all your guys' comments and make sure that these are done. Cause like I said, these are the technical people, these are professionals, so.
But now there's already agreement on, like you said, the meat and potatoes.
Right.
Green space,
Right.
access locations that they can then build, all the details around.
Yeah, and you know, nothing's perfect, but this would help things, the way you guys want everything to be developed. So this is a great process, so, you can go to the next slide, please. So as the overlay district, as you can see, it's supposed to come to you guys first. Give you guys recommendations, what you guys would like, any kind of improvements, landscaping development, maintenance, common space area overall. Then as you can see, it goes through subdivision review board. If they need any kind of variance, then they go to, you know, board of zoning appeals. Then, like I said, as they go through these process, they go through the regional because it is a new development. So by the way it was approved back in the day, regional is supposed to look at all development. Your rule is the same thing. They're supposed to look at the landscape and development type. Any kind of development improvements. Then like I put in red, you know, you guys are able to put special edition conditions on it and extend the public improvements, install landscape development improvements, stuff like that. But then, you know, like I said, it goes to the subdivision review board because they are make sure that everything you guys want on there is on there. And then by that time, we should have our paperwork. By that time, the preliminary or final plat should be almost done at this time. Like I said, when it goes through the process, first subdivision review board should get a concept plan. As they go to the regional and rural, they should have some kind of preliminary plan, at least 5 to 25%, at least to get it started. So then by the time it goes through the rest of the board, it'll be almost done and we have all the comments in and they will make the corrections. So by the time it goes back to the subdivision review board, it should be better than it was before.
Oftentimes, once it gets through to commission, it's typically at almost final, right? And then there might be some additional additions or slight changes for the final plan to be approved. That would be, again, what's being proposed, go back to subdivision review with reps these other boards to stamp that final plan.
So the next slide should be. Okay, so this is a great example of what a mixed use should look like. And on here, as you can it's hard to tell, but as you see, they put addresses on it. So then when the commercial type comes in, every building has address on it and we will sign off on it. You guys will sign off on it. and then they can start building. So we hope that, like I said, after I start training everyone on all the boards, we all can be on the same page and the process won't be as long and we can all get a great product. That's with everything. We're not gonna catch everything, but it would definitely limit the amount of, things we might miss. So it gives a chance to, especially with the board, the subdivision review board, and the rest of us, we can look at it, get a second eye. Especially after they make any kind of changes to it, we can always get stuff done.
Opportunities for public input, opposition, opinions, that sort of thing, still in those individual boards, notifications, still the same.
Yes, we can't get rid of those notifications. It's in the rules and regulations.
So those are technically hearings.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make sure
That is the way, to the rezoning and preliminary.
that this board knew that, the public comment period was still vital in the process.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. I mean, it's very important to have your community, will enjoy or like what you propose or what they propose.
Well, and to give you, for instance, back before Dennis was here, we had the truck stop down at 56 and 71, and the public did not want that. And they voiced their opinion, and I think at regional planning was as far as it got. The public, we made calls to gentlemen's other locations, and they found that there were some things going on in locations in Kentucky that weren't, fitting what he was saying he was gonna do in those locations. He was trying to do the same thing here, so through that public process, that stopped. That was 2.5 years ago, and it has not resurfaced. So my point is, the public process. Again, this is a proposed change, so nothing's changed right now. It'd have to this would probably, when you rewrite the zoning code, it would have to be in that text, but this is kind of just a heads up and see if that's something, this would be something you'd want to entertain, but the process would remain the same through the rezoning. That's what the public hearing portion of it would be, and it works, right? It's shown many times that it works. If there's enough public opposition, the project comes through. So,
Well, some of those meetings, that, and you guys know this, but running those hearings can be a big lift for these boards that don't do it on a daily basis, and it's, it's hard to keep the public comment reined in. It's tough to keep on track on what the decision is actually focused on, what the regulation is that we are using as our guidance. And, I don't necessarily know how these boards handle it, but just speaking from experience, that can be, very challenging running this.
Yeah, I know during these meetings, what I've been doing is that, let's say it's at a regional right now. I tell the regional, this is what the subdivision review board recommended. This is what I recommend. I normally tell them what section of each recommendation comes from in order to help them make a better decision. Then, of course, I'll let them know whether, if we had oppositions like that, opposition people to speak on it. There's always going to be, somebody's going to be upset about something.
Well, a lot of times the public doesn't even know what the hearing's all about. They don't know what the decision is, what's even being considered. They just got this notice in the mail. They come to this thing about a proposed development. So, a lot of times I would always, okay, we're here to consider this. This is the only thing we're looking at. It then has to go through this and this. What we're doing here is final decision.
Yeah.
I know you're mad at your neighbor 20 years ago, but that can't be considered part of our decision here.
Many tangents go on in development.
So, and we're doing a much better job of providing information on the website, for people to take a look at prior to the meetings.
Couple of questions. Thank you, Dennis. So the process as it stands now for the rezoning. as far as I understand it, would largely remain unchanged. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and just add the subdivision review board as the final say.
As the final say on,
Final recommendation.
Final recommendation,
When they
right.
sign, it's time for us to sign off. Just sign.
right, and then for the final plan, it just wouldn't go through all the relevant boards again. It would just go back to subdivision review board and they would give the final stamp of approval. So they would have the authority to do that. Is that
With the recommendation of the board, yes.
with the recommendation?
That means the comments from the board. So so as you go through it goes through subdivision review board. And then let's say it had to go to regional, the county, the rural. Then what they do is when they come back to the subdivision review board, I let the subdivision review board, information on what did the regional say, what did the rules say? And this is what they would like to see. And then if the plans do not match that, they will have to come back again for a subdivision review board until they actually make some kind of effort to change it. So,
And typically, and this is where it could go longer, you look at, if you go by the months and the meeting dates, you can go probably as quick, unless you call special meetings, probably about 4 months. What oftentimes happens though, in a good way, is after regional planning, there are discussions and suggestions to the plan in regional planning. They'll go back, the applicant, make those changes and suggestions, then go to regional, or rural zoning. And then rural zoning will take what they presented, then regional planning and those changes, and they'll review that plan. There may be some more changes, they'll go back and make those changes, and then that's when it would go to the commissioners for that final preliminary approval or rezoning. So as mentioned earlier, there are often times where by the time it goes through that rezoning process, you typically have a final plan in place. But then what currently is done is you have to go back through the process again, and you're getting these sign-offs by all these different boards, so you're doubling the time. Whereas what would be proposed is that this you get final approval for rezoning and that plan with the rezoning by the commissioners, it'll go back to subdivision review for that final stamp, literally stamp by all these entities signing off on this development. So
When
then
you say all these entities, you mean the subdivision review board?
subdivision review board, yeah, health department, planning development, or zoning department, and then all the Brian office, what needs to be done,
Engineer, water engineer.
water tank, yeah.
And is that because they're parties to the subdivision review board, or how does their stamp of approval, they each
They
have a
are,
seat?
They are, so they're technical, they're the people who know what needs to be done to meet standards within Madison County.
And then, as it stands today, it would go back to them, go through all the other boards, and then it comes back to the commissioners for the final, correct?
Right.
So it seems like the biggest issue is having to go back through some of those other boards that don't meet as frequently. Maybe things get bogged down. It doesn't seem like the commissioners hold it up. I mean, we meet every week, right? So, I mean, I wonder if having the final approval stay with the commissioners makes sense, just from a standpoint of, I mean, we're the people that are directly accountable to the public.
And the final decision will be.
it's just.
Oh, okay, you're not suggesting that, oh, okay.
No,
Okay.
it's just the technical part of it. Like I said, you guys don't know what K value. You know how to calculate K value?
Well, when you say the stamp, they give their stamp, what does that mean? What do you mean by stamp?
So after every preliminary and final plat, there's always a stamp of Madison County approval of the set of plans.
Mhm.
And so we have a stamp that has the health department, us, myself, those engineers,
Okay,
that we will sign it, but it also will have a place where the chairperson will have to sign it. And then if each board, I don't know, each board needs to be there, but we do have, a signature block for other boards to sign off to show that, yes, we are firm that this goes by our rules and regulations.
But by that point, it's already had all the hearings.
Yeah, it already had all the hearings, it was just standard.
Signing.
Right, but that's still not what makes it take effect. It still needs to be passed by the commissioners, right?
Oh, yes, everything else would change. We just shorten the process instead of having to go by you guys twice or three times. You know, it goes through you guys and then it comes for the last signature with the subdivision review board. So the process is not as.
Yeah, you're saying the rezoning process is basically fine once it goes through the rezoning process. Yeah, it's basically 99% done once it goes through the rezoning process. Therefore, there's not the need for it to go through this development process that takes 3 to 4 months to begin, because you're basically there already once it goes through rezoning. That's what we're doing.
But what,
We're not going 3 to 4 months, then 3 to 4 months. We're basically cutting out that second 3 to 4 months. Because the first 3 to 4 months, we're basically there.
Well, we could, correct, I see where he's going, which is maybe, is correct if I'm wrong. That all the stamps get done and then goes back in front of commissioners one, just so you guys get a final look at it, so you know what is being proposed. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Well, I think, I'm still trying to understand, but if it's the rezoning, that still comes to the commissioners,
okay.
right? And then it goes back, and then the final plan, does this stamp that you're talking about with all these parties, the subdivision review board, in what you're proposing, does that make it final or not? Does it have to go back to the commissioners or not?
well, on the other screen,
What's being proposed, it would not, but
Yeah.
that final stamp by the.
But
by
we
the
would still,
representative commissioners.
we would still have to sign it.
Yeah,
You still have to sign it. You want to sort of sign that.
Yes.
So when you say final stamp, that stamp would include the engineer, it would include the health department, it would include water and soil, it would include planning. It would include the board of commissioners, one of us signing off on it. So we would be one of the parties.
yes,
Giving that kind of final stamp of approval.
yes.
But not as a body, right? So one individual would sign on, right? There wouldn't be any,
Well, I mean,
There wouldn't be-
As
it
far
wouldn't
as
take an
representation of them.
would be represented.
right, so it wouldn't be a final decision point of the body. It would just be,
Yeah, it wouldn't be a final, yeah, it wouldn't be a final vote. We wouldn't vote on it again as a board. We would vote on it as a board for the final rezoning.
Right.
But that final stamp of approval wouldn't necessarily take board action. I mean, we could change the regulations so that could take board action as well, but.
And again, this is different than the plan process. Plan process, you guys would have final say.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. We really have,
Which I love the plan process, by the way, so like more negotiation and gives you guys.
like, you know, in the case of commercial, we've got standard C2, okay, where the plan doesn't become part of the zoning. But then we've got plan commercial, where the actual plan is part of the zoning.
Okay, so,
And that's what we're talking about signing off on.
correct, yeah, this.
okay, so that's, yeah, that is.
The plan residential, plan commercial, plan industrial.
Which you guys have
In
after.
those cases, the actual plan becomes part of the zoning
Correct.
versus residential.
Which already has sections, standards and guidelines within those designations, that's part of it too, right? So.
Yeah, that's what I said. We're basically 99% of the way there.
Exactly.
The first time. That's why I said that signature is really just affirming what you've already done. And the fact that it's almost a complete process at that point in time, but it makes it to the stamp of approval from those various entities.
It's just, you know, we're dealing with like, you know, you're basically asking somebody to double the process. It's just, it's, that we've had people vocalize that it's just, that's a lot for a time perspective. That's why Dennis has come up with this
And I think,
proposal,
and I
right?
think there's confusion because people think, and once they got it rezoned, that they can go ahead and do what they want. No, we haven't looked at anything, and that's the problem. We have one person now thinks that once we already approved their rezoning, that they can go ahead and develop something. Like, no, because we still need to go through the whole process of development.
Yeah, they still need their access permit, they still need their stormwater, bringing it back, they still need their water and sewer stuff.
Yeah.
Still need their approval from the
But ultimately, the commissioners, the board of county commissioners has to approve
The rezone,
the rezoning.
just
Yeah.
not the official, the final,
Yeah.
based on what you're proposing. Because I haven't had one of these since I've been on the board. I haven't had one of these yet, so.
And that's the time, it's trying to get ahead of this, for the building construction, the sewer planning and everything like that. And like,
you know, if you look at the comp plan, a lot of what's being proposed at 2942 and up on 161, whether that's the overlay or some other plan, a lot is planned. And again, you look at, a lot of communities that are developing and developing the right way, they use the plan process just because it again allows for negotiation, a lot of back and forth and discussion. But then we're also always gonna have these other types of zoning that's gonna be out there. So but if you're talking like, you know, the Ohio Premier project out there on 42, and there's others as well that are gonna be just going straight C2 or, you know, industrial or manufacturing, however you wanna classify within our zoning code. That's where this would come in, but you know, moving forward, a lot of the bigger developments, whether it be residential or industrial, commercial, most likely be in the planned arena and area, which would give you guys a lot of say in the final plan approval, because if you don't like what's in that plan, you can say, no, thank you, go back to the drawing board, add this, add that, you know. And so that's what we need, especially at other boards, they need your guys' guidance to make sure what's being developed, it's actually gonna be a good development.
You might think about just making everything planned,
I would love it, personally.
just so every commercial development had to go through the same process.
I would love it.
Instead of having planned commercial and C2, just have planned commercial.
Some bad idea.
Yeah.
You know, everything in budget is PUD, planned unit development, that can be
Yeah.
residential, commercial, mixed use, whatever, but everything goes through that plan.
Stanley West Jet, PCD.
Yeah, plan development makes it a lot easier. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Again, it's dialogue and it creates dialogue, right?
Yeah.
Because these other ones, the other designations have set guidelines within each designation. So there's not a lot of discussion and negotiation necessarily where the plan.
Yeah, they just follow the regs and do something, any one of the enumerated uses in there, whereas this, as you said, yeah, there was more of a back and forth between developer and community about what they want to see there. So yeah, I think we should strongly look at.
I mean, we
First, there
Reduce
is,
the amount of variance requests,
Yeah.
DCA's.
correct, yeah.
And I think we're giving out way too many variances.
Yeah,
We should allow.
A lot of times these guys end up issuing variances for something that realistically just needs to be an update to the zoning code, but the zoning code hasn't been updated.
Yeah, she's working on, which I.
No, I understand that wasn't the thing, I dealt with it as a BZA board member.
Yeah, I think we should strongly look at doing our own plan development.
Moving forward.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense.
So what has authority over what you're laying out? Is it you're at your discretion? Is it the commissioners pass a resolution that set the original plan in motion and then we would have to amend it? What, you're presenting the concept today, but is there an ask or a need of us?
Yeah, I will asking you guys to look at it and guide me on what you guys want.
To look at the
To
plan?
look at the plans and guide me if you want a certain process where you guys are actually saying twice or whatever. Let it be known. I mean, so then we can just have it going that way. So then, like I said, if anything comes in, it goes the same process.
But the final ask is going to be voting on an update to the zoning resolution.
Right.
Yeah, that's the ultimate.
The
Yeah.
process being the code.
This will be in the ultimate zoning update that we will vote on. So you're gonna update the zoning code, zoning resolution. This will be part of that update.
Right, so basically the ask, is status quo or what's the proposed change? So I don't think the ask is anything today.
Yeah, this is part of the overall project, to update our zoning code, the
Right.
resolution. Yes.
Yeah, because I would like to have subdivision review board hopefully look at it in 2 weeks. And then have every board after that review it by the time you guys get to you guys. You know, I already know what I need to do with the whole process. I can add that in the ordinance. So then everything is there. It's been a long road. I mean, it's hard to make a 125 page ordinance and been changed in 20 something years to fit today's standards, you know? So it went from 125 to about 310 pages. because that much is missing out.
Things weren't even thought of.
They never thought of, and stuff that came out, I was like, ooh, we need an ordinance for that, we need standards for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
Well, initiative too, I don't think anybody really took the bull by the horns, to update.
Yeah, well, we're looking at our subdivision regulations as well. They haven't been updated since the nineties. Yeah, that's another.
And reviewing it now and getting approval is great, but we can always amend certain sections if we need to, if we miss something, something needs to be added. It's easier to review a small article than a whole entire book again.
Will the boards consider the updates simultaneously, or do you envision it going from one board to the next, incorporating changes that maybe that board's already looked at, or how would you handle that?
So after every suggestion, I will go to the next board and say, okay, this is what they suggested. What do you guys feel about this? Or what else do you guys want to change on here? And then I go to the next board, and then soon later it comes to you guys, and I will do the same thing. This is what the suggestion through all the boards. You guys like, what you guys want to,
Who all
remove.
Who all actually has to approve the zoning resolution?
So it goes through the same process.
Yeah.
Right.
If the BZA doesn't.
No, we not, we say it when we feel it, but about, we'll let them know what the.
So the regional planning have to.
Regional planning, we'll go to rules zoning, and
Commission.
yes.
So if we're the last to see it, will you take our recommendations back? If we have any suggestions, will you take them back through the other boards again? Or how would you-
If you guys want me to,
Well,
if.
how would you handle that?
What we want.
Yeah, I would think if we would had any final changes we want to make, those would probably go back through.
Yeah. Yeah, but the hope would be that through that process, as each board make a recommendation, the applicant can take it back.
Well,
There.
We're talking
we're
about.
talking about the actual projects.
We're talking about the actual code.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna stay out.
One body makes a recommendation, the next body makes a recommendation, we get here, we have further changes, further recommendations. Would you take those further changes, recommendations back all the way through the process?
I would.
Yeah.
I would. So then when it comes together, second time around.
That's right, that's what I'm thinking, you want to build consensus, so you take it back through again. Yes,
Question.
That's-
It's an important document.
Yeah.
that's what I figured.
You don't want to rush, it's just like a comprehensive plan. You don't want to rush it either because there's always something that comes out that you forgot.
Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense to me, I like what you're doing, keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Questions?
In the spirit of modernization, efficiency,
Yeah, desperately needed done.
expediency.
Well, and as you said, we wanna present a good face to business, we wanna have a code that's up to standards and reliable and business friendly, so.
We want the counties and maybe people complain about what we require, but I don't want them complaining about our process.
Yeah, limit those uncertainty and, yeah.
I don't want them to feel like they're dealing with a professional, well-organized,
Consistent.
consistent government agency.
Correct, and that's something we've been doing for 4 years by bringing a lot of good people on board. Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
Ryan, you might have a suggestion.
Brian, you have a suggestion?
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Budget today, I'm still complaining about everything. You are complaining. What do they complain about? Oh, it's everything, coughing and puffing and rolling their eyes, oh, this reading over that, you got it. You did, oh, I saw it.